My daughter's math competition sponsor called me saying, "Your daughter placed first again and other parents are demanding an investigation." The call came while I was driving home from work on a Thursday afternoon. I saw the name on my car's display and answered immediately because Diane Fletcher was the regional coordinator for the Youth Mathematics League. "Mrs. Kovach, we need to talk about Sophie." Her voice had an edge I had never heard before. "She won the state qualifier this weekend. First place again. That makes 4 consecutive victories." I felt pride swell in my chest and said congratulations were in order. Diane cut me off. "Other parents are filing formal complaints. They want an investigation into how Sophie is winning. They're saying it's statistically impossible for a 12-year-old to dominate this consistently without outside help during competitions." I nearly swerved into the next lane. "Outside help? What are you talking about?" Diane sighed heavily. "They think someone is feeding her answers, maybe through a hidden device or signals from the audience. The complaints specifically mention that Sophie solves problems too quickly and never seems to struggle. They want her searched before the next competition, and they want all her previous wins reviewed." My hands gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles went white. Sophie had been passionate about mathematics since she was 6 years old. She taught herself algebra from library books when other kids were watching cartoons. She spent her free time solving problems for fun and watching university lectures online. The idea that her genuine talent was being questioned because she won too often made my blood boil. I told Diane this was absurd and offensive. "My daughter works incredibly hard. She studies constantly." Diane's tone softened slightly. "I believe you, but I have to take these complaints seriously. The parents are threatening to withdraw their children from the league if we don't investigate. Some are talking about going to the media. They're saying the competitions are rigged and that certain families have unfair advantages." I asked what kind of advantages they meant, and Diane paused. "One parent suggested that because your family is European and places high value on education, you might have access to resources or coaching methods that give Sophie an unfair edge. Another said something about private tutors who teach competition strategies instead of actual mathematics." I pulled into my driveway and sat in the car trying to process what I was hearing. My daughter was being accused of cheating because she was too good at something she loved. The accusation about being European felt especially pointed. My husband and I had immigrated from Hungary when Sophie was 3 years old. We worked regular jobs and lived in a modest house. We never hired tutors because we could not afford them. Sophie's gift was natural and nurtured through library books and free online resources. I told Diane none of those accusations were true and asked what happened next. She explained that the league board would meet in 3 days to discuss the complaints. They wanted Sophie to take a proctored test under observation to prove her abilities were legitimate. They also wanted to interview her about her preparation methods. If she refused to cooperate, she would be disqualified from future competitions, and her previous wins would be vacated. The unfairness of it burned in my chest. I asked if any other competitors had ever been subjected to this treatment. Diane was quiet for a moment. "Not that I'm aware of." I walked into the house and found Sophie at the kitchen table working through a differential equations textbook she had borrowed from the local college library. She looked up and smiled when she saw me. Her dark hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail, and she had pencil smudges on her fingers. "Mom, I just figured out an elegant proof for this problem. Want to see?" I sat down next to her and took a breath. We needed to talk about something serious. Her smile faded when she saw my expression. I explained what Diane had told me about the complaints and the investigation. Sophie's face went through several emotions in quick succession. Confusion, then hurt, then anger. "They think I'm cheating? But I love math. I would never cheat. That would ruin the whole point." I told her I knew that, and I believed her completely. She asked what we were supposed to do, and I said we would cooperate with their investigation. We had nothing to hide. Sophie would take their test and show everyone exactly how talented she was. She nodded, but I could see tears forming in her eyes. Why do people want to punish me for being good at something? That question haunted me for the rest of the evening. My husband Leo came home, and I filled him in on the situation. He was furious. "This is discrimination. They see a young girl from an immigrant family excelling, and they immediately assume something must be wrong. If Sophie was a boy from an established American family, would they question her success?" I did not know, but suspected he was right. We decided to document everything. I started a detailed log of Sophie's study habits, the resources she used, and her competition history. I gathered every piece of evidence that demonstrated her legitimate preparation. Leo suggested we contact a lawyer just in case this escalated beyond a simple investigation. That felt extreme, but I could not shake the feeling that this was about more than just verifying Sophie's abilities. The next morning, I called 3 parents whose children competed in the same league. I wanted to understand what was being said about Sophie. The first mother I reached was Linda Chen, whose son had placed second in 2 recent competitions. She was apologetic, but confirmed that several parents had been meeting privately to discuss Sophie's dominance. "I didn't sign the complaint," Linda said, "but I understand why some parents are concerned. Sophie is just so much better than everyone else. It makes people wonder." I asked what specifically made people suspicious, and Linda hesitated. "She solves problems in minutes that take other kids half an hour. She never asks for clarification on questions. She never makes mistakes that she has to go back and fix. It's almost like she already knows the answers before she reads the problems. I felt my frustration building. Those traits described someone who was exceptionally skilled, not someone who was cheating. I asked Linda if her son studied as much as Sophie did. Well, David does his homework and we got him a tutor for the competitions. He studies maybe an hour a day. I told her Sophie studied 4 to 6 hours daily because she genuinely loved mathematics. She read textbooks for pleasure and solved problems to relax. Linda was quiet. That seems like a lot of pressure to put on a child. The implication was clear. Some parents thought our family was pushing Sophie too hard and creating an unhealthy competitive environment. I thanked Linda for her honesty and ended the call feeling more frustrated than before. The problem was not just that people thought Sophie was cheating, they thought her level of dedication was abnormal and possibly abusive. The board meeting was scheduled for Saturday morning at the community center where competitions were usually held. Leo and I arrived with Sophie 30 minutes early. Diane Fletcher met us at the entrance with an older man she introduced as Robert Gaines, the State Mathematics League director. Gaines had silver hair and the formal manner of a retired professor. "Thank you for coming," he said, shaking our hands. "We want to handle this fairly and transparently. Sophie will take a 90-minute exam in a private room with 2 proctors present. The test will include problems from previous competitions, plus some new questions at her level. Afterward, we'll have a brief conversation about her preparation methods." I asked if the parents who filed complaints would be present. Gaines shook his head. "They've submitted written statements which the board will review. This is not a trial. We simply need to verify Sophie's capabilities and ensure the integrity of our competitions." Sophie had been quiet, but now she spoke up. "What happens if I don't do well on the test? Does that mean I was cheating before?" Gaines looked uncomfortable. "We're not expecting you to fail. We just need documented evidence of your abilities under controlled conditions." They led Sophie to a small conference room where 2 women were waiting with test materials. I hugged Sophie and told her to just do her best. Show them what she could do. She nodded and went inside. The door closed and Leo and I were directed to a waiting area down the hall. The 90 minutes felt like hours. I kept imagining Sophie in that room being watched and judged by strangers who already suspected her of wrongdoing. Leo paced the hallway, checking his watch every few minutes. Finally, Diane came to get us. Sophie finished early. She completed the entire exam in 55 minutes. My heart sank. Finishing early would probably make the suspicious parents even more convinced she was cheating. We followed Diane to a larger conference room where the board members were seated around a table. Sophie sat in a chair looking small and nervous. Gaines had the test papers in front of him. "I've done a preliminary review of Sophie's answers," he said. "She got every question correct. Her work is shown clearly and her methods are sophisticated but appropriate for her level. She even provided alternative solutions for several problems." One of the board members, a woman named Grace Turnbull, leaned forward. "Sophie, can you walk us through how you approached problem 7? It was a number theory question that typically takes competitors 20 to 30 minutes. Sophie straightened in her chair and began explaining her thought process. She talked about recognizing the problem as a variant of the Chinese remainder theorem, and how she had studied similar problems in a book about ancient mathematical techniques. Her explanation was clear and confident. She was not reciting memorized steps, but genuinely understanding the underlying concepts. Grace nodded slowly. "Where did you learn about the Chinese remainder theorem? That's usually a college-level topic." Sophie explained that she had worked through an undergraduate number theory textbook last summer. She enjoyed learning about the history of mathematics and how different cultures approach similar problems. Another board member asked about her daily study routine. Sophie described her schedule without hesitation. She woke up early and did problem sets before school. During lunch, she read math books. After school, she worked on competition prep and explored topics that interested her. Weekends were for deeper study and watching lectures online. Gaines asked if her parents pressured her to study this much. Sophie looked genuinely confused by the question. "No, they tell me to take breaks. My mom makes me stop studying to eat dinner. My dad tries to get me to watch movies with him. I study because I want to. Math is like puzzles and I love puzzles." The board members exchanged glances. Grace asked one more question. "Do you feel stressed about winning competitions?" Sophie thought about it. "Sometimes I feel nervous before competitions because I want to do well, but mostly I'm excited to see the problems. Winning is nice, but I really just like solving hard questions." The room was quiet for a moment. Then Gaines cleared his throat. "Thank you, Sophie. You can wait outside with your parents for a few minutes while the board discusses." We filed out into the hallway. Sophie asked if she did okay, and I assured her she was perfect. Leo squeezed her shoulder. "You showed them exactly who you are." 10 minutes later, Diane came out and invited us back inside. Gaines spoke first. "Based on Sophie's performance today and her interview, the board finds no evidence of cheating or inappropriate assistance. Her abilities are clearly legitimate and extraordinary." I felt relief wash over me, but it was short-lived. Grace spoke next. "However, the concerns raised by other parents about competitive fairness are not entirely without merit. Sophie's dominance is discouraging other participants and creating an unbalanced competition environment. Several families have indicated they may withdraw if the current situation continues." I asked what they were suggesting. Gaines folded his hands on the table. "We'd like to propose that Sophie move up to the high school division starting next season. She would compete against older students, which would provide more appropriate challenge and allow her peer age group to have more balanced competitions. Sophie's face fell. But all my friends compete in the middle school division. I don't know any of the high school kids. Leo leaned forward. You're punishing our daughter for being too good. Instead of celebrating her talent, you're removing her from her age group to make other parents happy. Grace's expression hardened. We're trying to find a solution that works for everyone. Sophie will still be able to compete. She'll just face more appropriate competition. I felt anger rising in my chest. This was not about appropriate competition. This was about appeasing parents who could not accept that their children were being outperformed. I told the board we needed time to discuss this as a family. Gaines said they would need an answer within a week as the next competition season started in 3 weeks. We left the community center in tense silence. Sophie was fighting back tears. Once we were in the car, she finally broke down. It's not fair. I didn't do anything wrong, but they're making me leave my division anyway. They're punishing me for being good at math. I turned around from the front seat and took her hand. I know, sweetheart. This is completely unfair, but we're going to figure out what to do. Leo started driving and his jaw was clenched. We should fight this. Get a lawyer and challenge their decision. They can't force Sophie to move divisions just because other parents are jealous. I understood his anger, but I also saw how defeated Sophie looked. Fighting would mean more scrutiny, more accusations, more stress. I was not sure if winning that battle would be worth the emotional cost to our daughter. That evening after Sophie went to bed, Leo and I stayed up late discussing our options. We could fight the league's decision and potentially win, but create an even more hostile environment for Sophie. We could accept the move to the high school division, but Sophie would lose her peer group and might face resentment from older competitors. Or we could withdraw from the league entirely and find other ways for Sophie to pursue her passion for mathematics. None of the options felt right. Around midnight, my phone rang. It was Linda Chen. I heard about the board meeting, she said. I wanted to apologize. I didn't realize how far the other parents would take this. David told me tonight that Sophie always helps other kids with problems before competitions. She shares strategies and explains concepts. She's not trying to make anyone look bad. She just loves math. I appreciated Linda's apology but asked why she was calling so late. Because I did some digging. The parent who organized the complaint against Sophie is Veronica Hale. Her daughter Meredith has placed in the top 5 several times but never won first place. Veronica is on the board of directors for a private STEM academy. She's been recruiting top performers from the public league to attend her school. My stomach tightened. What does that have to do with Sophie? Linda's voice dropped. Veronica approached several families, including mine, about scholarships to her academy for talented students. She specifically mentioned that without Sophie dominating the competitions, other students would have better chances to win and get noticed by elite programs. I think she manufactured this complaint to either force Sophie out or get her recruited to the academy where Veronica could take credit for developing her talent. I felt cold fury spreading through my body. This entire investigation was not about fairness or competitive integrity. It was about one woman trying to manipulate the system for her own benefit. I asked Linda if she would be willing to share this information with the board. She hesitated. I don't have proof, just conversations and implications. But I'll support you if you challenge their decision. What they're doing to Sophie is wrong. I thanked her and hung up. When I told Leo what Linda had said, his expression turned dark. We need to find out more about Veronica Hale and her academy. The next morning, while Sophie was at school, Leo and I started investigating. Veronica Hale's academy was a prestigious private school that catered to gifted students in STEM fields. Tuition was $30,000 per year. The school's website prominently featured students who had won various competitions and credited the academy's innovative teaching methods for their success. I found several articles about Veronica herself. She had founded the academy 5 years ago after working in educational consulting. She was a major donor to various youth academic programs, including the Mathematics League. Her influence in the regional STEM education community was significant. Leo discovered something more troubling. 3 students who had previously dominated youth mathematics competitions had transferred to Veronica's academy within the past 2 years. In each case, they had faced complaints or conflicts in their previous programs before moving. One family had even filed a lawsuit against a competition organizer for unfair treatment. The pattern was clear. Veronica identified talented students, created problems for them in their current programs, then offered her academy as a solution. I called Diane Fletcher and asked for a meeting without the full board present. She agreed to meet me at a coffee shop that afternoon. When I arrived, Diane was already there, looking tired and stressed. I sat down and told her everything Linda had shared, plus what Leo and I had discovered about Veronica's pattern of recruitment. Diane's face went pale. Are you saying Veronica manufactured the complaints against Sophie to recruit her? I laid out the timeline and the pattern. The complaints had come from 3 families, all of whom had students at Veronica's academy or were considering enrollment. The specific accusations about unfair advantages and resources matched the talking points on the academy's marketing materials about how public programs failed to support truly gifted students. Diane put her head in her hands. Veronica is a major donor to the league. She funds several of our programs. If she's been manipulating complaints to benefit her school, that's a massive conflict of interest. I asked what could be done about it. Diane looked up. I need to bring this to Robert Gaines immediately. If there's evidence of manipulation, the complaints against Sophie should be dismissed, and Veronica should be removed from any position of influence. 2 days later, Gaines called and asked to meet with our family. We returned to the community center where the board had gathered again. This time, Veronica Hale was present, sitting at the end of the table with her arms crossed. She was an elegant woman in her 50s with sharp features and expensive clothing. Gaines addressed everyone. New information has come to light regarding the complaints filed against Sophie Kovacs. We've discovered that several families who signed the complaints have financial or enrollment relationships with Mrs. Hale's academy. Additionally, we've identified a pattern of similar complaints being filed against other high-performing students who were subsequently recruited by the same academy. Veronica's expression remained neutral. "Are you accusing me of something, Robert?" Gaines continued. "We're concerned about conflicts of interest and the possibility that complaints were encouraged or coordinated to benefit your institution. That would violate the League's code of conduct for board members and donors." Veronica leaned back in her chair. "I support gifted education. If families approach me about opportunities for their talented children, I provide information about my academy. That's not manipulation. That's offering solutions." Grace Turnbull spoke up. "Did you initiate contact with the families who filed complaints about Sophie?" Veronica paused just a moment too long. "I may have mentioned to concerned parents that there were formal processes available if they felt competitions were unfair." Leo could not contain himself. "You manufactured a crisis around our daughter to make her available for recruitment. You tried to destroy her reputation and force her out of the league so you could swoop in as the savior offering a scholarship to your expensive school." Veronica's composure cracked slightly. "Your daughter is exceptionally gifted. She's wasting her potential in a public league with minimal resources. My academy could provide her with opportunities you couldn't imagine. World-class instructors, research partnerships, direct pipelines to elite universities. I was trying to help her." I stood up, and my voice was shaking. "You were trying to use her. You saw a talented child you could exploit for your school's prestige and your own reputation. You didn't care about the emotional damage you caused or the accusations you made against a 12-year-old girl. You just wanted another trophy student for your marketing materials." The room erupted in overlapping voices. Board members demanded answers from Veronica while she insisted her intentions were misunderstood. Finally, Gaines slammed his hand on the table. "Enough. Mrs. Hale, you're removed from the board effective immediately. The complaints against Sophie Kovacs are dismissed as baseless and potentially fraudulent. Sophie will remain in her current division and all her wins stand without question." Veronica stood up abruptly. "This is a mistake. You're allowing jealousy and paranoia to override your judgment. That child is too advanced for her division and you know it. But fine, keep your mediocre program. My academy will continue producing champions while you coddle underperformers." She walked out without another word. The board members looked shaken. Grace apologized directly to Sophie. "I'm so sorry you were put through this. You did nothing wrong and you should never have been questioned." Sophie nodded quietly, but I could see she was processing everything. Gaines added that the League would be implementing new policies about conflicts of interest and donor influence. They would also be reaching out to the other families affected by Veronica's recruitment tactics. We left the community center and Sophie was quiet during the drive home. Finally, she spoke. "Mrs. Hale said I was wasting my potential in the public league. Is that true?" Leo immediately responded. "No, you're learning and growing exactly where you should be. Her academy might have fancier resources, but it comes with strings attached. You'd be a commodity, not a student." Sophie thought about that. "I like being able to study what interests me and go at my own pace. I don't think I'd like being pushed to be someone's champion." I felt proud of her wisdom. At 12 years old, she already understood that genuine passion was more valuable than external validation or prestige. The next competition was 3 weeks later. Sophie competed in her division as usual. The atmosphere was different this time. Several parents approached me to apologize for believing the accusations. Linda brought David over to talk strategy with Sophie before the event started. When results were announced, Sophie placed first again. But this time, when she received her medal, the applause was genuine and warm. Other competitors congratulated her without resentment. The toxic environment Veronica had created was beginning to heal. Over the following months, more details emerged about Veronica's practices. 2 families came forward with stories about how she had pressured them to enroll their children by suggesting their current programs were inadequate. One parent recorded a conversation where Veronica explicitly said she could make problems disappear in exchange for enrollment. The State Education Board opened an investigation into the academy's recruitment practices. The Mathematics League implemented strict ethics policies, preventing board members from having financial interests in educational institutions that competed for the same students. Sophie continued to excel in competitions, but she also started tutoring younger students who were struggling with mathematics. She said helping others understand concepts she loved made her happier than winning. I watched her explain a geometry problem to an 8-year-old with infinite patience and realized Veronica had been completely wrong. Sophie's talent was not being wasted. It was being used to lift up others around her. That was worth more than any elite academy's prestige. The state investigation into Veronica's academy concluded 6 months later. They found evidence of predatory recruitment practices and misleading marketing about student outcomes. The academy was placed on probation, and Veronica was required to step down from leadership. Several families withdrew their children once they understood how they had been manipulated into enrollment. The school's reputation suffered significantly. Meanwhile, the Public Mathematics League grew stronger. Enrollment increased as word spread about the supportive environment and the emphasis on genuine learning over cutthroat competition. Sophie helped design a mentorship program pairing advanced students with beginners. The program became a model adopted by other regional leagues. When Sophie turned 13, she received an invitation to participate in a national mathematics Olympiad. She competed against the best young mathematicians in the country and placed in the top 20. The experience was challenging and exciting. She came home energized and full of new ideas to explore. No one questioned her legitimacy or suggested she had cheated. Her abilities spoke for themselves. 2 years after the investigation, Sophie was in high school and still competing in mathematics. She had scholarship offers from several universities for when she graduated. But more importantly, she still loved mathematics as much as she had when she was 6 years old solving problems from library books. The accusations and investigation had not broken her spirit or made her doubt her passion. One evening, she came to me with a letter she had received. It was from a student at Veronica's former academy who had read about Sophie's story online. The student thanked Sophie for exposing the toxic environment and explained that several students had transferred to public programs after realizing they had been recruited under false pretenses. The letter ended with a request for advice about rediscovering love for learning after years of pressure and performance anxiety. Sophie spent hours writing a thoughtful response about staying true to your own interests and not letting others define your worth through achievements. I read her reply and felt overwhelming pride. My daughter had been tested in ways no child should face, but she had emerged with her integrity and compassion intact. She used her gift not to dominate others, but to help them grow. That was the real measure of her exceptional nature. Thanks for watching till the end. Make sure to subscribe and like to not miss the next story.